And now a little story from the Appleseed.
Y'all are such good sports. You are really good sports. Sometimes people ask me what I do for a living. And when I say, I tell stories to grown-ups, they look at me with this look like, come on, what do you really do for a living? And even when I try to explain it, they don't really believe it because it's a really strange way to make a living. But the truth is, I've had a lot of strange jobs. I have been an au pair for 3 little French children in Paris. I have been a house mother at a home for runaway teenagers. I have been a blues radio DJ. I have taught Cajun and Zydeco dancing. I have been an adjunct professor of theater at a local college there in Birmingham. I worked in a concession stand at the ball field across the street from the house where I grew up when I was 15 years old. On games when there would be, on evenings when there would be a ball game, the concession stand would be open. And we would sell, of course, soft drinks and bags of chips and candy bars and hot dogs. Burke's Best All Beef Franks that we did not grill, we boiled so that they would kind of blow up and explode and kind of split down the middle, and you'd serve them in a hot steamed bun with a drizzle of mustard down the middle. And when I worked in that concession stand, I was so crazy about this one boy. He used to sit on the top left bleacher right there on the third base line. I found it. He didn't go to my school, so I didn't really know him, but I found out that his name was Gary Schloppick. And he was so dreamy, that light brown hair, those gray-green eyes. And sometimes he would come up to the concession stand and he would slam a quarter down on the counter and say, "Just a dog, no mustard." Oh. Of course, he never even knew I was alive, which probably was just as well. Because, you know, if we had gotten together and it had worked out and we'd gotten married, right now my name would be Dolores Hydock. So, but my first real paying job was working at Luden's candy factory, putting eyes on chocolate bunnies. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania. How many of you played Monopoly and you'd get the little card, take a ride on the Reading? How many of you thought it was take a ride on the Reading? That's the way it looks. You'd think that's the way it's pronounced. No, it's Reading, Pennsylvania, named after Reading, England, the birthplace of William Penn. And when I was growing up there, Reading was home to the Reading Railroad and Luden's Candy Factory, where the cough drop was invented. Mr. William H. Luden invented the cough drop. He was the son of Dutch immigrants living there in Reading, and when he was 15 years old, he quit school because he had to start working, and he began making candy on his mother's kitchen stove. It was that hard candy, you know, like the kind that's in a lollipop or a sour ball. Hard candies that he would sell at all the businesses and homes around downtown Reading. And one day, one of his best customers didn't buy any candy, said he had this terrible cold and couldn't taste anything except the menthol drops that his pharmacist had given him. And Mr. Luden had the idea to go home and put some menthol drops right in the candy syrup. And the cough drop was born. In fact, there used to be a huge billboard on the main road into town that said, "We started the Cold War, Luden's." Well, the cough drop was invented in 1881. But when I was a senior in high school, which, thank you very much, yes, was a few years after 1881, they were still making those cough drops there. They were still making Fifth Avenue bars. They invented the Fifth Avenue bar there. They made jelly beans and all kinds of hollow chocolate holiday specialty candies. And that's where I got my first real paying job. And it all started because of a coat. It was a spring coat, which I know would sound like a very strange article of clothing to anybody who lives in a place where it is warm most of the year. But the Pennsylvania of my childhood was not warm most of the year. Pennsylvania, when I grew up, had a range of 4 different seasons. We had all kinds of weather, all kinds of temperatures, and so you had a wardrobe of coats. You had the winter coat, the one that was left over from Napoleon's march on Moscow. It was long. It was below the knees. It was not made of fleece. It was not made of Polar Tech. It was wool. It weighed 50 pounds dry, 75 pounds wet, heavy enough to hold you down on icy sidewalks, give a little 8-year-old kid some traction. Then you had the all-weather coat with a zip-in lining for when the weather was a little less fierce. But then it got to be late March, early April. It's the season for daffodils and bunnies and bonnets with bows on them. You don't want to wear that drab old khaki all-weather coat. You want something with a little pizzazz to it, maybe some polka-dot buttons, a little flip at the hem, something with a promise of brighter days to come. So you had a spring coat. And that's what this coat was. It was a Saturday morning, the February of my senior year of high school. My mother and I were in town shopping. We were at Pomeroy's department store on the second floor, and I saw that coat. It was a spring coat, pale tan, so pale it was almost white. It had round, shiny, dark brown buttons. It looked like little malted milk balls marching down the front just off center. It was displayed with a dark brown silk scarf, and it was shown with a pair of chocolate brown, supple leather driving gloves. Maybe remember driving gloves with a snap closure at the wrist and the holes at the knuckles where you grip the steering? Oh. I wanted that coat. I wanted those gloves. I looked at my mother. She said, "Don't even think about it." And she gave me that look that mothers have when they are finally forced to admit to themselves just how incredibly stupid their very own child actually is. I mean, I get it now. I mean, she wasn't being stingy. She had before, many times, bought me incredibly beautiful clothes. I mean, the green silk dress for the piano recital, the red velvet jacket with the rhinestone buttons for the junior year Christmas dance, the orange, brown, and gold, horizontally striped, double knit, turtleneck, miniskirt with the chain belt. Okay, that was a major mistake, but when I asked her for it, she got it for me. And so when she said no to the coat, she was just being realistic. I mean, an almost white coat, hopelessly impractical, impossible to keep clean. I didn't need a new spring coat, and the gloves were out of the question. Gloves with holes in them? You want to spend good money for gloves with holes in them? I'm sure I pouted. And she said, "Fine, you want the coat, you want the gloves, save up your own money and buy them." Well, I remembered seeing on the part-time jobs bulletin board outside the guidance counselor's office there at school, there was an index card indicating that Luden's Candy Factory was looking for short-term, part-time help to backfill their inventory of Easter candy. And so Monday after school, I walked the 9 blocks from the school to 8th and Walnut Streets to the 7-story red brick building you could smell before you could see. Roasting almonds from the Fifth Avenue bars, sugar and menthol from the cough drops, but mostly the chocolate that went into the Santas and Valentine hearts and Easter bunnies that filled drugstore shelves all year long. I filled in the application, was told to come back the next day after school with a hairnet. And Tuesday at 3:30, I took my place on the line. You know how they make hollow chocolate? How they get the hollow space inside? I didn't know how they did that. I'm sure now it's all way automated. But here's how they did it then. They had these metal bunny molds that had a hinge in the middle, and that hinge was attached to a long metal pole. So there's all these bunny molds on this long metal pole. And a machine would squirt melted chocolate into half of the mold. The mold would close and start spinning around the metal pole as it moved through this refrigerated chamber where the chocolate would harden on the inside of the mold. Then it would come out of the refrigerated chamber, the mold would pop open, and the bunnies would hop out on the conveyor belt. And the woman at the top of the line had a metal-tipped cloth bag full of melted chocolate, and she would make 3 squirts of chocolate on the bunny to serve as a kind of glue for the candy eye, candy bow tie, and candy sprig of flowers at the bunny's feet. So squirt, squirt, squirt. Then the bunny would roll on down the line past my fellow women workers and I, all of us in our hairnets and white aprons, each of us with a big cardboard box full of candy decorations in front of us. One woman put on the bow tie, one put on the sprig of flowers. I put on the yellow and black ovals that were the eyes. Now, you had to work pretty quickly to get that candy decoration out of the box and onto the bunny before the melted chocolate glue hardened. So it was box to bunny, box, bunny, box, bunny, box. Box, bunny, box, bunny, box, bunny, box. After 15 minutes of rabbit optometry, I was bored out of my mind. So I started singing, not out loud, just inside my own head, singing every song I could think of, trying to make the time go faster. I finally made a deal with myself. There was one Paul Simon song that I just loved, Kathy's song, and I knew all the words to all 6 verses. And so the deal was I had to sing all 6 verses 5 times through before I could look at the clock again. So 6 verses 5 times through. 11 minutes had passed. The bunnies were in profile, so they just got one eye. But sometimes we did a run of chocolate lambs, and the lambs sit facing forward, so they get 2 eyes. So you could make the lambs look up or look down or look both ways. That was the creative part of the job. I wish I could tell you that this was like some zany episode of I Love Lucy, the hilarious chasing of runaway bunnies, lots of laughing, lots of joking, lots of chatter. It was not. The women did not talk on the line. Box bunny, box bunny, box bunny, box bunny, box bunny. This was not a sitcom to them. To those women, those chocolate bunnies meant groceries on the table, meant rent money for the landlady, but it meant more than that too. Those chocolate bunnies meant Easter bonnets and bicycles and baseball gloves and piano lessons for their kids. I know, that's what they talked about when we'd take a 15-minute break halfway through my 4-hour shift. They'd talk about how excited they were about the special things they were able to bring home to their families because of that job. That's what they were working for. I was working for an impractical spring coat and a pair of gloves with holes in them. I wasn't there long. Did not take long to backfill that inventory of Easter candy, but I was there long enough to get that coat, that impractical, impossible to keep clean coat that I wore until I wore it out. I loved that coat, and that job had given it to me. But that job gave me something else too. That job gave me a look at the world through different eyes, through bunny eyes, yeah. But also through the eyes of those strong women who worked hard, standing on that line 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, more if they were lucky enough to get overtime. And now every springtime, when I see those foil-wrapped bunnies marching down the drugstore shelves, I think about those women and how proud they were that they were keeping their families together, helping to provide not just essentials, but a little something extra too. And when I think about those women and I see those bunnies, I think about the little message, the little tiny bit of life wisdom that the spirit of those women has left tucked inside that hollow chocolate space. The lesson that other people might look at you and think you are just a $1.98 drugstore bunny. But you know, you may be the centerpiece of somebody's one and only Easter basket. So stand up straight. Keep your eye open. Don't look back, look straight ahead. And when you can, bring a little sweetness into somebody's life.
Thanks for joining us for a little story from the Appleseed.